Hello, everyone. Today we have a great invitee. We have Dr. Francisco Rodriguez, Chancellor of the Los Angeles Community College District. I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Rodriguez introduce himself and maybe tell us what colleges are in the district, number of students and staff. But welcome, Dr. Rodriguez.
Buenos dias, Dr. Buelna, and everyone who's listening to BuelnaNews today. I'm Francisco Rodriguez. I am the Chancellor of the Los Angeles Community College District. We are a community college district in the state of California. We comprise 9 separate accredited colleges throughout the county of Los Angeles. Our service area touches about 40 cities and unincorporated areas in Los Angeles with about a service population of over 5 million. Our 9 colleges proudly serve 232,000 students this academic year.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rodriguez. I'm not used to quoting Henry Kissinger, but he did an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal. And he said, now in a divided country, efficient and far-sighted government is necessary to overcome obstacles unprecedented in magnitude and global scope. What does that mean to you when you hear that, specifically about government being farsighted when it comes to the Los Angeles Community College District?
Well, my initial reactions was that this notion of the world coming together in a way that's going to solve this global pandemic, my view is that the only way that it will be solved is if the world comes together, and government needs to look both short and long term at its infrastructure so that they can not just survive this and contain this particular invisible enemy, as it's called, but also put in the infrastructure and footprints and pillars so that we can restore our faith in government, our faith in the economy, and indeed our confidence that we're going to be moving forward as an institution. The challenge right now, Dr. Buelna, is that we're in early April and this pandemic is not yet contained. We are still trying to assess its impact, the kind of damage that it will do, both socially, medically, psychologically, economically, and still the edges of this pandemic are not yet defined. So the natural and I think expected anxiety associated with this is to be expected. And indeed, the role of government and agencies such as the Los Angeles Community College District to be clear, to communicate, to be responsive, to be active, to be engaged, to be fully forthright, transparent in its communications and its resources is absolutely essential.
Dr. Rodriguez, there's a saying, has your cheese been moved? Has LACCD's cheese gotten moved? And if it has, how do you get that cheese back?
Yeah, there's queso all over the place, So what I mean by that is, the disruption that has been caused over the last 4 weeks, in particular related to this pandemic, I'll just call it that in its global sense, has indeed caused us to think about relationships, partnerships, our engagement, our local internal infrastructure, as well as the infrastructure that is needed externally to, in our particular case, to allow us to continue our promise to deliver high quality, affordable, and accessible education to the masses. As you know, we are the community college district in the nation that serves the most students numerically, but also the district that serves the students with the most needs. There is no district that serves more students who are, for example, former foster care, former incarcerated, or justice involved, students who are first generation, students who are poor, students who come from families with very, very low incomes and not having a history of education, students with disabilities. So we are that institution that is represents America, that represents California, its rich, beautiful diversity. So when we're looking for external support, it is because we want to serve the populations and families who indeed are the most vulnerable previous to this pandemic and who are now more vulnerable because of it.
So, but Chancellor, I'm going to push back a little here. So, if our cheese has been moved, the pandemic has come in, the classes of the district are online, and a lot of things are happening right now that are unfair. Rent and people losing their jobs in likely in the tens of millions. So I'm going to ask you an unfair question. How do you as a leader know what you don't know in order to make sure that cheese gets put back where it should be?
Well, clearly, we're an educational institution and we're not equipped or prepared or can solve the other major societal issues that are impacted by the pandemic. However, we can take care of our particular lane, if you will, our responsibility to ensure that higher education continues to the masses, continues to those who have dedicated their interest to a higher education. So, my full focus is on that, and also being aware that we're going to need other strategic partners, conversations, and other agencies that are going to help us to fulfill the other basic needs that folks have. We're clearly paying attention to what's happening locally here in the city of Los Angeles with respect to rent and evictions and unemployment, the state orders related to stay at home, if you will. I mean, we're obviously paying attention too because we're impacted by the external environment, both locally, state, and federal. But what we don't know are the things that we can't control. What we can control is our local academic educational environment to the extent that we can. And it's our responsibility as an organization to do our very best with the responsibility that we have. We're not equipped, prepared, or funded to do the other things. So we're going to rely on our partners who do those things very well.
And we're going to talk about some of those partners in a bit. So, but in general, I've asked faculty, staff, administrators some questions. And, one of the questions is that how do they come together as a faculty, staff, administrators, maintenance, and community in general to fulfill the mission of the district? Tell me that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Buelna. It's been a beautiful thing, a miraculous thing. I've used that word. I've tried to refrain from religious references in my public talks, that's with my team and with others in the district. But it is indeed miraculous what we are seeing. Consider the fact that 3 weeks ago, we had to come to and draw a consensus and say yes to the proposition of moving essentially 95% of our courses to a remote learning, to an online format in some cases. We were at 18% of our curricula online. So we moved and shifted, and this week, March 30th, began the first week of our complete remote learning environment. Consider that concurrent to that, we moved close to 10,000 employees to remote work environments with tools, with other licenses, with other equipment, if you will, that would prepare them to work from home. And the reason for this is that we are trying to do our very best to do our part as an agency, as a community college district that's very large, very diverse, and very expansive, to flatten the curve, if you will, to mitigate the strain on our hospital systems, to limit the community spread that we know is possible through this pandemic, and to be responsible stewards of the community, if you will. So we've done all that while balancing the academic mission of this organization. On March 30th, we've just completed our first week, and it's gone relatively well, according to reports that I've been receiving from all these constituencies. Our faculty, our professional classified staff, our administrators have all come together because of our principal and absolutely dedicated mission to sustain the academic calendar and to fulfill the promise of a higher education, irrespective of the circumstances. And that's a pretty powerful zeal, and I'm very proud of the team here at LACCD and the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Before we get into some specific questions, how are you as an individual dealing with it? How's your family? There aren't any restaurants, so are you cooking? Tell us a bit about how, not the Chancellor, but how Dr. Francisco Rodriguez, or just Francisco Rodriguez, is handling the situation?
Thank you, Dr. Buelna. Thank you for asking that question. I've thought a lot about that, and I've tried to model certain behaviors with my team, the presidents and executive staff, and those who I come in contact with. Well, it's been quite a transition. As you know, the office that I'm in right now is my second home. I spend a lot of time here, but I've been spending less time here over the last 2 weeks. I've slowly been transitioning, or quickly transitioning, I should say, to a remote work environment where I have most of the tools, if not all the tools I need and materials to conduct the business of the organization moving forward. I've not lost a step in that environment. I live here in downtown Los Angeles, not far from the district office. My family lives up in Northern California. My wife is now retired, but has been now deployed back to do some work as an instructional dean at Woodland Community College. So she's working with the same kind of transitions that we are. And my son is a professor at San Jose City College, and he's been in a remote teaching environment for the last 3 weeks. And my daughter is a third grade school teacher at San Francisco Unified School District. So they have been off doing remote learning, and they will through May the 1st, and potentially, as we're now hearing, through the end of the academic year. So we're all educators. We're all, K through 14, if you will, involved. And so we're trying to address this the best that we can. First and foremost, by staying healthy. Secondly, by engaging in those kind of behaviors that minimize risk. Secondly, by working from home. All of us are doing that as much as we can. Then thirdly, trying to sustain a psychological and physical balance with the demands of being, in my case, in an apartment for working 15 hours a day. So those are very interesting times that we're in. And yes, Dr. Buelna, getting back to my college days of cooking and making sure I know how to do frijoles, arroz, and a carne asada, and I have my barbecue outside. So I've been trying to cook for the week on weekends, and then simply make quick things throughout the week. So it being self-sufficient comes in handy during these times.
Thank you very much. Before we get into the academic parts of the district, our maintenance staff, our staff who do financial aid, our administrative, our non-faculty staff, can you tell us a bit how we're dealing with maintenance? Are we deep cleaning? How are the staff dealing? And we'll get to faculty right now and students, but tell us about how those operations are going.
Well, thank you for recognizing and mentioning those classifications of our colleagues, if you will, that are on the front lines for us, quote unquote front lines for us, which means going to the actual colleges, cleaning our institutions, sanitizing, and then actually sealing off those buildings. Our student services and our teaching, 95% of it is remote. And our student services is almost 100%, if not already 100% remote, which means that we have very, very few people, physical people on our college campuses, in addition to a high level of security that we have to protect property and protect our institution and the people who are indeed on campus. So we have not let that part go. In fact, we have bolstered it. But our custodians, our custodial supervisors are doing absolutely remarkable work, diligent work to clean, sanitize, and seal off our institution so that when we do return to what is now going to be, a face-to-face learning environment, whenever that occurs, we can ensure that those areas are clean, are sanitized, and are free from any kind of potential spread. So,
Thank you. Do any of tell me how some of our staff feel. Are they scared? Are they concerned? Yeah. How are they feeling?
Thank you for that question. I've had the opportunity to speak to all constituencies regularly through formal consultation, if you will, or informally and just in my phone call or email or even text communication. So I feel like I have a good pulse of the institution. There's no one feeling or set of feelings that describe the vast institution, and there's no one word to describe the psychology. But I would say, in general, I'll just give it as in broad brushes. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is incredible intensity. Our faculty's uncommon dedication to the success of our students. Fearless, courageous, innovative, entrepreneurial, absolutely leaning into the conversation and doing everything they can to sustain their academic curricula program. Our student services folks providing those kinds of services to bridge the academic support remotely. I mean, they're doing phenomenal work as well. So the institution is responding. The people are doing the work that it needs to do. The business operations of the district are moving forward. But clearly, Dr. Buelna, there's an anxiety because we don't know what we don't know yet about what the ultimate impact of this invisible enemy, this pandemic, will be. And that causes understandable anxiety, understandable strain, stress. If you watch the news for any period of time, at any point of the day, the numbers continue to soar related to COVID cases. The numbers of deaths continue to mount here locally as well as internationally. And that, you have to be concerned about that. So again, that's where we go back to the kinds of behaviors that will mitigate the community spread and the kind of behaviors that will enforce and encourage healthy habits. So no, it's a very precarious time.
So moving on to a larger narrative on community colleges and higher education. So Governor, in a time of really absence of national leadership, and I see Dr. Fauci, I almost think, wow, he's kind of our President Fauci at this point. Governor Cuomo, when talking about New York State's budget, mentioned right now, he said, right now we have money for hospitals, but once we reopen, I don't know how education will get paid for because there will be no money. So here in California, how do we make sure that the agenda of the community colleges, or how do you make sure as the chancellor of the largest district that the narrative of community colleges and the budget of community colleges is protected?
Right. Thank you. That's an excellent question. And really the question that I think I'm spending a lot, if not most of my time on. We've got excellent administrators and college presidents who are dealing with the day-to-day operational issues at their respective institutions. But when it comes to policy of the organization, that is the responsibility that I have. When it comes to working with our board of trustees to keep them informed as to these policies and decisions and to getting the support of our governing board, who is elected by the public, it is my indeed responsibility to do that. So I'm working hand in glove with our board of trustees to ensure that they know at the highest levels what it is that we need to prepare for. Related to the budget itself, as you know, we are still a little unclear as to what will occur over the next several months. Our budgets right now are driven by enrollments and by completions and by the types of students that we serve. Those are sort of three buckets, disproportionately funded, mostly by enrollments. But that's essentially the equation, if you will. So if we lose enrollments, if we don't have enough completions and our students drop, who fit into this particular categories, that's not good for our organization. And we do anticipate some of that to occur. The May revise coming up will tell us quite a bit, and we've heard already and seen reports that the May revise will be vastly different than what the Governor Newsom proposed in January, which was in general very favorable to higher education, to community colleges, and to the investment of the infrastructure. Clearly, the state's reserves are being challenged and depleted and used to try to address this statewide crisis emergency, if you will. So we'll see what happens in May. We're watching it very closely. I've worked with our staff to devise both a flat revenue projection that is steady state compared to a year ago, and a 5, 10, and 15% revenue loss for our organization. I'll be sharing that with the Board of Trustees very shortly so they can understand what the implications are of a flat 5, 10, or even 15% reduction in revenues and what it means for our organization. But ultimately, my role as a chancellor, you asked about that specifically, first and foremost, my role as an educator, I'm as the quote unquote CEO of this organization, I have to be its principal advocate, its principal connector, facilitator, a communicator, if you will, of our needs and interests, both at the local, state, and federal level. And I've done that and will continue to do that to position this district in the best place that it can with the fiscal reality and what we are able to do come July 1, assuming that's our new fiscal year and everything moves forward as we expect. But what's also important, Dr. Buelna, is to have a clear understanding, which I do, about this particular region, its people, its demographics, its needs, it's how it's indeed constructed, who we are, and our particular needs. And I mentioned some of the demographic profile before of LACCD. This pandemic is having a disproportionate impact on people who are less resourced, people who are poor, people who don't have infrastructure or safety nets that can allow them to be resilient in this particular environment. And that is the organization who we educate the most. So that is my responsibility, along with my partners, educator colleagues, our board of trustees, to ensure that we are best positioned. Yes.
Are you the person that the community goes to hold accountable if anything goes wrong?
Well, I think as a CEO, that is correct. As I'm as accountable as the Board of Trustees in that regard. The Board of Trustees has fiduciary responsibility for governance, for policy, et cetera. And it's my responsibility to position the board for good decision making. So if something doesn't go right, if you will, depending what that is, I understand not everything's going to go right. I'll tell you that right now. But a lot of things are going to go well because of our collective intelligence and because of our foreshadowing what indeed could occur. And we've done a pretty decent job so far. So the issue is, what is the impact of that, whatever that is, not going right? And what is the impact on our organization?
Thank you. A general question. So in terms of the current emergency situation, is this an opportunity to build strength and increase some of our skills at the same time?
Yes, both. Dr. Buelna, this environment that we find ourselves in, and we're still in it. We're not looking back, reflecting on what occurred and what the positives and negatives are of a particular situation. We're in it in real time. I have my emergency briefing just a couple of hours from now, where I get briefed on COVID cases, the environment, the impact of our technology infrastructure, so on and so forth, so I can have a real-time assessment daily, if not twice, 3 times daily, as to our organization. So yeah, it is an opportunity. We have found that we have incredible strength. The greatest strength that I have found and discovered is our human capital, the intelligence and strength and capacity of our people in this organization has been profound. But I've also saw and have seen some vulnerabilities and areas that we have to continue to shore up for this kind of response and for our future sustainability.
So let's talk about our undocumented students here. Mm-hmm. The number of undocumented students affected by not only because of the pandemic, but because of the Trump administration's attacks on the undocumented have reduced our LACCD's number of undocumented students attending. So how are undocumented students being affected, and how specifically are, for those of you who don't know, at the community colleges, they're called dream centers. So what is that outreach and nexus occurring between the dream centers, online learning, and the undocumented?
Yes, again, another important community to speak of and about, and an important question there. Well, the drop in enrollment, which has been stubbed, it really started in the spring of 2017 with what was, I think everyone would admit, a rhetoric that was chilling for our families and for our students. It's been followed up by other kinds of orders, including the public charge order more recently, that sends just a chill effect and fright over our undocumented student communities, and rightfully so. These are perilous times that we live in, and to not give that topic the seriousness that it deserves, I think, frankly, is irresponsible. Our district has done the exact opposite. We have responded by standing up very quickly 9 Dream Resource Centers, have resourced them, supported them, and have tremendous support from our legal community, our other allies who help us to sustain and support these organizations. In a time like now, and indeed, as you referenced, we serve the most undocumented students in the state of California. LACCD serves more undocumented students than the CSU and UC combined. So we have a very, very strong interest to serve this population, and we'll continue to do so. Now, the question becomes, in this environment, Dr. Buelna, how do we serve them? Well, the initial response is we need to serve them remotely. That is, we have a sense, a caseload, if we will, of who they are, the kinds of needs that they have. Some are psychological, some are social, some are mental health, some are financial, and clearly, most of it is legal support. Many of our students come from mixed status families, so they're individual cases that have and require individual customized responses. So the issue for us is to first signal through social media, through my writings, in English and in Spanish and in other languages if we can, to signal that we continue to be an open environment, a place where undocumented students are safe, that this is their haven, and that we want them to continue their education in an uninterrupted fashion. Clearly, this pandemic has put a strain on the face-to-face opportunity for that, but it will not reduce our interest nor our intensity to ensure that each student receives the kind of support that they need.
Thank you very much, Chancellor. So with regard to the county's African-American population and the population of students that are African-American, it's gone down. And a few months ago, the district invested a few $100,000 in outreach in order to increase the amount of African-American students attending the district. What needs to occur now in order to change that, in order to make sure that LACCD's percentage of African-American students increases?
Yeah, thank you for that question too. Another important student population and community interest of ours. Well, in short, I'll answer the question shortly. Our interest in to continue to attract, enroll, and graduate students from the African-American community has not waned at all. In fact, it perhaps is fortified during this time where we think about communities and populations that are less served and under-resourced. So our interest and our zeal will not be shifted at all. In fact, it's, I believe, strengthened and fortified. But the other practical answer is that we will probably need to, and I'm fully prepared to, provide additional resources both to the undocumented student community and to the African-American student community to ensure that the slide in enrollments that we've had over the last several years for both populations is curbed. So it's about resources and leadership.
So the amount of students that are community college students and homeless, as you know, is huge. Mm-hmm. And before the pandemic situation, the Board of Trustees made student housing and assisting homeless students a priority. Would you agree?
Yes.
So during this time period, what message could you send those looking to help homeless students? And yes, that's it.
Okay. Well, again, these are very vulnerable, under-resourced student populations, those who are food insecure, those who are homeless. What we're doing and have been doing over the last couple of years is really leverage the resources of our community, both nonprofit as well as county, resources to put in homeless navigators, people that our homeless students could look to for resources such as emergency aid, hotel vouchers, and other kind of rapid rehousing. If we simply need to rely on those agencies that are best positioned to do that and to fortify their strength and their ability to connect with the kinds of students who are homeless to receive the resources that they need. In addition to that, we've also been very, very clear to our homeless student population that our policies are related to them will, again, not wane. And we're trying to connect resources to students, to people during this particular period. The housing discussion is a much longer population discussion because of its complications on housing, on colleges, housing near colleges, who would build, who would support how we run, and how we sustain an operation like that. So that continues to be something on our docket to explore in the long run. But in the short term, students need housing and shelter and food right now. So we're doing everything we can with the support of our local advocates and others to give them the help that they need.
Thank you very much. A few years ago, you and I were having a conversation about philanthropy and the goal of the district with regard to how much the district should raise in terms of a foundation.
Yes.
What was the goal that we talked about?
Oh, well, I can remember. We called it Buelna's Billions.
So what was I talking about in that conversation?
Well, I think it was a good conversation, a long conversation, if you recall. We spent a lot of time thinking about how we would do our best to attract resources, cash, capital, investments, all the different ways that wealth is built, if you will, to the organization. And it was a very rich conversation.
It was a rich conversation, Chancellor, but in this type of situation right now with state funding going down, I think you can see why I was pushing the conversation.
Yeah, no, very clear.
So in this situation, how are you pushing philanthropy to its limits, because LACCD is such a large district that we get our fair share? And let me just be very clear. I have nothing against USC, love USC. They have a $6 billion endowment. I believe UCLA has $3.3 billion. LACCD has approximately $37 million. And we've made some advances. You're about to go over them.
Yeah.
But how can you challenge philanthropy to really look at community colleges and saying, we deserve our fair share. LACCD deserves its fair share.
Yeah, thank you. That's a message that you and I are very parallel with, and hopefully that message will continue to be articulated. Well, our assets are low. They're about 50 million combined with our college and district foundations, and it's not very much when you consider the size and need of this organization. What needs to happen initially is a growing awareness about the role, impact of community colleges. About 50% of every student who enrolls in higher education in the country enrolls at a community college, and 1 out of 4 students who enroll at a community college in the country enroll at one of California's community colleges. Yet, only 2%, that's 2% of all philanthropic giving goes to the community colleges nationwide. That has to change.
So Chancellor, this is an area specifically, this is very important, that if you're a foundation and representing foundations, look to community college, because right now, foundations and philanthropy, tell me if I'm wrong, are failing not higher education, but specifically community colleges. And right now, community colleges need it. Is that true?
We need it. Absolutely, we need it. I mentioned the student populations before, the families that we're working with, the most vulnerable, and indeed the most under-resourced. And if these philanthropic organizations want to make immediate impact, getting resources into the hands of students right now when it's needed the most, community colleges are indeed the most nimble and the most responsive to do that. Over the last 3 weeks, through the great efforts of our district foundation and others, and our board of trustees, our college presidents, and others, we've been really pounding the pavement here. And I'm happy to share that the district has received gifts and pledges of about $900,000 in the last 3 weeks from family foundations, from organizations, from corporate environments that allow us to provide laptops for students, connectivity, internet connectivity, food vouchers, as well as emergency aid to make sure that our students stay in school and have their education as uninterrupted as possible. So locally, the Los Angeles philanthropic community is responding, but we could certainly use more help.
Thank you. Let's move on to information technology. There isn't anything, I think, well, there are things greater, but in terms of the district's IT. So the digital divide. The digital divide is generally defined as students and populations of color in the country that have not had access to technology, computers, internet, and affecting the skills necessary in order to improve income and employment. So at the district is what's occurring right now with coronavirus. Do you think is it having a positive or negative effect on the digital divide? And what's LACCD doing to make sure to close LACCD's digital divide?
Yes, well, as you point out so accurately, Dr. Buelna, the digital divide and digital equity existed well before the pandemic, and it's mostly been attributed to lower income or under-resourced communities. What the pandemic does, it exacerbates that, because the resources that the family might have are going towards other basic needs. So in our particular case, through a recent survey that we did, we had about 4 or 5% of our students who responded to this quick survey of about 13,000 students, smaller sample for us, but if indeed the percentages hold, about 4 or 5% of our students have no connectivity, have no computer. So what we have done is right now we have distributed about 4,000 laptops for students through student laptop scholarships. And we have another 4,000 that we've ordered and are on the way that we will be distributing to students so they can get the tools that they need in hand. So that's how we have responded. And again, our philanthropic community has allowed us to do that very quickly here. Our college foundations are also partnering with their student clubs and organizations to provide additional resources to students to mitigate the digital divide.
How many Chromebooks and laptops do you need specifically right now?
Well, right now we could use another 10,000.
Okay, so if the LA Community Colleges got 10,000
yes.
right now, that would end the digital divide. Great. Chancellor, how do we improve the pedagogy in online education to assure that rapport that students need and faculty need to truly get through education? How do we improve that while we're improving connectivity and getting people together? But how do we connect that learning so that human interaction also isn't lost?
Yeah, excellent point. Well, we're going to have to. If we want to continue to provide quality, accessible education that students can benefit from, we are, in this mode now of learning more about how to teach online, et cetera. We had a significant number of our faculty who are already trained and certified to teach online, but now 95% of them are doing so. So we have put in professional development support and other kinds of continuous training to ensure that the faculty knows how to use the tools that they have through what we're describing as the Canvas shells and Zoom and other tools, Labster and a whole host of other software tools that they are using now in a remote learning environment. 95% of our courses, as I mentioned earlier, are online. So so the first answer is we have to, and our faculty are responding remarkably well, quickly, and as efficient as they can, knowing that we have to do some catch up for some who aren't as fluent and conversant in the technology.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'll say moving forward, I don't believe that online or remote learning is going to replace the face-to-face. I don't. We will return to an environment where face-to-face needs to occur. There are courses that are better placed in that kind of face-to-face environment, if you will. And this current pandemic will not replace face-to-face, but it will certainly accelerate students learning in this environment, instructors teaching in this environment, in our organizations from a technological standpoint, having to support those environments.
Thank you very much. Moving on to mental health. So a lot of our students students are at home. My daughters are at home. They, one came back from college, one is in high school graduating, prom is ending, graduation has been postponed. The amount of stress occurring in families and sometimes in tight-knit situations is difficult. And we're all dealing with that stress. So how is LACCD dealing with mental health in this environment? And how could students look to the district for help?
Yes, thank you. It is indeed mental health and stress. Stress is a wicked partner to leadership at times, particularly during unprecedented situations that we have now. So, we've tried to discuss that amongst ourselves as leaders in the organization. I certainly have made my team aware of that. So self-awareness is part of it. The other piece is giving ourselves license to check out in the evening and to do things that are not so stress related to COVID, if you will. And that also is important so that we become fresh for the tasks that we have ahead of us. Our students that we've established, and with the external support of partners and agencies and county support, a phone-in hotline, if you will, that they could call and talk about these particular matters and get the kind of support that they might need. But this is an area that I sense that we're going to need a lot more support in. And, Dr. Buelna, we're in trauma right now. We have to understand and recognize that we're living in real time through trauma. It is not usual and customary to have our streets empty, to have everyone stay indoors, sheltered for long periods of time, but we have to do that to sustain healthy living standards and environments. So understanding that we are in trauma, that students are dislocated. Many of our students look at our campuses as home, as a safe haven, and they are now dislocated. So that adds indeed a phenomenal amount of stress that we simply need to be cognizant of and being aware of it and reaching out for support is, I believe, a good first step to try to resolve that.
So moving on to enrollment, let me just ask you to guess here. That's as fair as I could be. What is your best guess with regard to whether we will see more or less enrollment in our community colleges?
Yes, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that too, because our budget is so driven by enrollments, if you will. So I suspect that we're entering our first week, entering our second week of online enrollment. We've not seen significant drops just yet, but with the excused withdrawal policy that is statewide now, where students can withdraw from a class and not have any marking on their transcript, it's as if they never took the class. I suspect many will do that. Others will not be able to flourish in an online environment, and they need a good grade, and they don't believe that they can do good work, so they will drop out as a result of that. Some will lower their course load from 4 or 5 classes to 2 or 3, so we'll lose some enrollment there because of the necessity, if they do have a job, for additional hours to sustain other members of their family who are perhaps not working. So we see that kind of just real strain of students dropping, not because they want to, but because of physical necessity. And you'll see others just being, stressed by the whole environment and not. So the short answer is I do see a drop in enrollment initially, and then I will see a surge. I will predict a surge in enrollment when the unemployment hits sky high, when folks need to be retrained, repurposed, if you will, to the workforce. And the brutal and maybe even cruel irony is that is the time that we need state and federal support the most. And I'm hopeful that they'll be in a position to provide us the support we need to provide the classes, coursework, training, and certification that our unemployed, underemployed, and dislocated workers will need.
So, but Chancellor, so that's really one of our biggest opportunities right now, that we need to be very clear as we come out of this, and even during this pandemic, to tell the state and the federal government, hey, we expect a significant increase in funding, because a lot of that unemployment that we're expected to see, a lot of those individuals will have access to, again, maybe you might be able to educate us, the LA Promise program, federal financial aid, state financial aid. What are some of the opportunities that you can share with the public, so that if you just got unemployed, how can you start getting enrolled for the summer, or get enrolled during the summer, and how could the LA Promise, and potentially for free?
Yes.
So what's that opportunity so people could take advantage of it now?
Yes, there are many opportunities. Thank you for pointing those out. As a matter of fact, our second 8-week classes begin real soon. So if a person is unemployed right now, or recently unemployed, they could go log on to our colleges now and enroll right now.
Where? Be specific.
LACCD.edu, or click on any of the colleges, and then the college's registration enrollment, and it'll take you through the whole thing in an online format. So our second 8-week certification and courses start right now. So okay. I would say,
what's the cost? Tell the public the cost, okay, and the benefits that they can get right now in order to lower anxiety. Going back to our previous question.
Okay. Well, if a person has not filled out their FAFSA form, which is the federal aid, financial aid form, if you will, and that's at FAFSA.gov, then you're going to have to pay out of pocket for these until you get the kind of services and financial aid that you qualify for. It's $46 per credit hour. If folks want to get a skill, look at our huge, and I mean huge, non-credit coursework that we have available at all 9 of our colleges. Some offer more than others. Those courses are absolutely free. And for students who are thinking about where they're going to be going to college next fall, right now, I believe that May 1st is the student intent to register date for the UC and CSU, or June the 1st coming up. They can enroll at any one of our 9 LACCD colleges. We guarantee enrollment. We guarantee priority registration, and the costs are absolutely free for the first 2 years of a full-term education.
So right now, individuals can sign up for the next 8 weeks
yes.
courses, right?
Yes.
And the website for that is again?
LACCD.edu, and then click on any one of the colleges. It's in our top right-hand corner, and then go to registration there, and then they go to academic schedule, etc.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about innovation, right? Right now, innovation is extremely important. What does innovation mean in community colleges, has anyone on the Board of Trustees pushed you on that?
In fact, oh, perfect. Yes. As a matter of fact, we have a district-wide committee, Innovation, Technology, and Sustainability, chaired by you, Dr. Buelna. So yes, we have been, and I use your word, pushed, but also motivated and inspired, and indeed organized to think about that subject a little bit more, particularly in the area of technology. And clearly,
what does it mean for the community colleges?
Okay, it means to be nimble. It means to pivot. It means to be entrepreneurial. It means to be civic-minded as we do so, and it means to leverage the resources to be able to respond to the kind of needs that are out there for the students that we serve. If we don't respond, we're not relevant. So innovation and technology will allow us to be relevant in this new market that we find ourselves in.
Chancellor, how would you challenge individuals? Because sometimes we all have our political networks, we all have our ego, we all have our things that we want to protect, right? So what would you, and it's hard to predict what every individual and every individual's personality. What would you say to folks with regard to behavior during this time period that what we're looking for in order to improve things for everyone?
Well, yeah. I would underscore the kind of behaviors that we have seen to respond to this pandemic in the way that the district has so quickly, so efficiently. But I would also say and challenge folks to say, change is inevitable, change is here, and the pace of change has indeed accelerated. So I would say be mindful for people that like change and like rapid change, the kind of environment that we're in now presents opportunity, and people aren't as anxious about it. For people who don't like change and like an institutional pace that is much slower, much more, if you will, involved and much more engaged, if you will, it's going to make them feel uncomfortable. We're not going to forego consultation or forego, if you will, the kinds of shared or participatory governance traditions and cultures that we have, but we are going to accelerate them.
Thank you. And what are some of have you seen, can you give us an example of maybe your best innovation in curriculum and teaching or learning, or anything from our administrative staff to our cleaning staff to our security to anything? Tell me something that comes to mind of someone who's been the most innovative that we could share so others could do it to in other districts as well.
Well, there are thousands of examples on the curriculum side. I mean, thousands of courses that one would have not thought are easily transferable to a remote learning environment in the career tech education area, in the lab area, the things that we say, oh, this can only be done face-to-face. Well, we have proven that they can be done and done rigorously in a remote learning environment. So there are thousands of examples. As you know, we had to move 9,500 courses to a remote learning environment in 2.5 weeks, and our faculty have responded. The other thing I would say is look at some of our faculty who are really populating their Canvas shells beautifully. I mean, in there are videos, there's asynchronous lectures that are in there. There's all kinds of resources and links, and it's a really rich kind of academic bubble, if you will, for that class, where the students have literally at their fingertips, they can pull down the kinds of information that they need to have real-time learning. Some of that stuff is just remarkable and innovative and as rigorous, maybe even more rigorous. A faculty member shared with me that he prefers now and was a critic of a remote online learning environment, but now has seen that all of the students now have to engage.
Do you have any one example that stands out?
I would say the laboratories, using Labster as one of biology and chemistry. Those are courses that we'd always build big facilities and fume hoods and laboratories and chemicals. And now we're doing all those things online in a very rigorous environment to ensure that the students get the content knowledge they need to move on in a transferable course to the university or for their preparation for schools of nursing.
How are we dealing with physical education with our baseball teams, our football teams are?
Well, they are literally, they're recording physical training exercises. They're recording and students are sending in, like we're doing now, records of their training, if you will. There's online physical activity courses. It's kind of like a jazzercise class, and where you have your person in front of you and you've got all your people through Zoom doing the same exercise or doing the same set of activities. So our faculty have been responsive in our kinesiology departments to show. We're also in our culinary programs are showing demonstrations in their labs, through their homes or through their laboratories as ways that students can continue their education and learn the stuff that they need to get their certificate, their degree, or to transfer. Second
to last question. How have you seen yourself as an individual and professional change that could maybe send a message and guide the rest of us?
Yeah, thank you. It's a powerful, that's a deep question. I didn't expect that, but let me share this. It's a good question. I've been a lot more introspective about myself, my leadership capabilities, my vulnerabilities, my frailties, areas that I know where I have strength, areas that I know that I need to improve. And all of those have been challenged during this time. When I say that, in a transparent way and in an honest way. When in stressful situations, we tend to go to the leadership style that we're more comfortable with, but it may not be the one that people actually need. So I've tried to be mindful of what people need and not what I'm comfortable with. So what I've tried to do is to, be guided by particular values and guided by particular consistent communication approaches and styles, so that whomever is listening to me in written form or in these kinds of presentations or when I'm hosting meetings, if you will, that they understand that the district has its hands firmly on the wheel, and that we are foreshadowing as much as we can. There has to be someone in the White House looking ahead as to the roadblocks, the barriers, and that indeed is the Board of Trustees, and that is indeed your Chancellor. And that's the road that I am taking. I'm not getting involved with the nitty-gritty details. I'm expecting that to be handled and handled professionally by those who are most prepared and closest to that particular action. My responsibility, guided by a sense of duty, a sense of responsibility, a sense of authenticity, transparency, and yes, indeed, I will say this, and I will say this proudly, a sense of faith too, that we will get through this and get through this well. So yeah, it has been a lot more introspective in many ways and thoughtful, and tried to be responsive and not let my fatigue or my lack of energy. I've tried to sustain my social, mental, emotional, and physical health along the way as much as I could, not always successfully, but as much as I can during this time.
Thank you. So my last question, which is going to get into that, is, so I have a feeling that we're going to look back at this time period and think of everything as pre-coronavirus and post-coronavirus. So we're getting through the corona. Maybe we're in that intermediate stage right now. But what does communicating and communications mean in this interim, then future post-coronavirus environment? As an educator, as a leader, in order to reach out to the literally 230,000 students, 20,000 odd faculty, and to others in higher education who are going to be hearing this, that they could look at some of these maybe best practices that we're seeing, or not so best practices, maybe what doesn't work would also be helpful.
Yes, thank you. Well, my first immediate reaction is that communication is everything. What I mean by that is that if we're not clear in our communications, the message can be misunderstood, miscalculated, and misappropriated, if you will. So clear, consistent, concise messaging is important, and who the messenger is also very, very important. And I understand the role of the trustees and the role of the chancellor, the role of the college presidents, the role of our emergency operations center, and having their respective but coordinated complementary communication roles and messages together. I understand that, and will commit to continuing to do that. What's also important here is for our folks to see that their CEO, if you will, is not panicking. I'm not. I'm thoughtful. I'm resourceful. I've got tremendous amount of energy and a lot of resources at hand that will help us navigate through this. While people may not see this right now because we're still in the assessing the impact phase in so many ways, because we have not put our arms around this completely as a society, as a global community, and as an organization. But we are getting closer to that we're actually moving into a stabilization period. That this environment that we find ourselves in now, Dr. Buelna, is an environment we're going to be in for the foreseeable future, maybe throughout the calendar year and perhaps even beyond. We've already signaled and have noted that our summer classes will be completely remote learning and or online, completely. And then perhaps we'll be making a decision very shortly about the courses that can't go remote learning, can't go online, what we do with those, like our schools of nursing and other certification professional schools that we have and programs. And then very shortly after that, make a very strong decision about the next academic year. You simply don't know, but we are in an environment where we are indeed stabilizing. We're getting our arms around it. What we don't know is the flurry and flare and incidence of COVID cases and what that might mean to the physical health of individuals in our organization and the physical health of our community. That we simply don't know. What we do know is that by staying home, by staying indoors, by practicing social distancing and other behaviors that have been, well documented everywhere you turn, that we will help suppress that curve, if you will, and lessen the strain on our medical professionals who are on the front lines, engaged in absolutely miraculous, courageous work to save our community, indeed save our world.
So, okay, there's one more question. It's a one-word question. Graduation.
Virtual or postponed, and we'll walk in person, and I'll shake everyone's hand that I can when it's safe to do so. But right now, we have a committee that is formed. They will begin meeting Monday, that it would include the voices of students and very, very smart people around the district that will try to sustain the traditions and honor and respect that is associated with commencement and graduations, and see if we could do that virtually on June the 9th, one way or another. If we can't do that, or the strong sentiment is to simply postpone, we will postpone and have it done in a miraculous, fantastic, beautiful way when the social distancing guidelines are lifted. So,
Chancellor, I think graduation is a complex question and has brought some challenges for other universities. Are you including? Is there going to be a survey? Students have been passionate about this. And
yes.
Direct.
Yes, direct, passionate, which they're always direct and passionate at LACCD from the trustees down. Your chancellor is direct and passionate.
Of course.
But yes, I would expect nothing less. Of course, the voice of the students will prevail here. Ultimately, it's their celebration. We will do, and we are looking out to do a quick student survey that will complement the student voices throughout our campuses to this committee and what they recommend. I've asked for a plan back by May 1st. I suspect I'll get it back sooner.
And I'm asking that only because, we have, how many community colleges in California?
There are 115.
And nationwide?
About 1,200.
So everyone is dealing with this. So everyone should know in general how LACCD, because this might be helpful to you in terms of knowing that we're all dealing with this. But before we go, Chancellor, do you have any, for those of you who don't know, I'm also a trustee at the Los Angeles Community College District. Chancellor Rodriguez, do you have a question for me?
Yes, I do. What do you see as the board's role in supporting the chancellor? Because the board has a singular employee. That's me. The other 10, 12,000 fall under my responsibility through others. So what do you see as, in this pandemic, the role of the trustees to support the chancellor, support the organization in navigating this pandemic?
I'll reframe the question or the answer. Go ahead, Chancellor.
You don't get to reframe the question.
Okay, that's a good point. So I would say, one, supporting the leadership is very important. Being positive, but asking questions at the same time. Mm-hmm. We represent the public, and in Los Angeles, that means over 15 million people that we represent. The LA community colleges are an extremely important part of our economy, making sure that this is the bridge to the middle class, to families eating. We have an obligation and a duty to push you, in fact, as the chancellor, to your limits. We also have an obligation to foresee and to make sure that things are moving forward. And to also push other elected officials throughout not only the community colleges, but at our local city council to partner with us more, the boards of supervisors, to push the governor to understand what we face. Because if they want to see change, it will happen through one of the main vehicles is through us. And at the national level in DC, to understand that Los Angeles, we have the largest port, our economy, California in general is the 5th largest economy. California without Los Angeles. I think Los Angeles County by itself would be maybe the 7th or the 9th largest economy. So as a trustee, we do not have the luxury of allowing and viewing a situation to go off the rails, as you would see. So, sometimes we may be shy people. I'm not one of them, by the way. But we have to speak up, and we have to push our systems harder. And sometimes it will be uncomfortable, as we do that. But I think, one of my critiques of, for instance, our national organizations like ACCT is that they, in my view, tell the trustees to be passive, and no, you know what? We need trustees and elected officials to be active, to ask questions, to educate themselves. We represent, in this time period, millions of people expect us to be smart, to think, to articulate, to do research, to not accept certain things. Did I answer your question, Chancellor?
You did. Yeah. Yes, you did very, very well, very eloquently. I don't disagree with any of that. I'll just speak generally now. Sure. What's important during these times, especially now throughout the nation, that these governance roles be clearly defined and implemented and indeed fulfilled. And what I mean by that is that there is the tendency for people to want to solve problems, particularly those who are in elected officials. But in the trustees' role, this is a national perspective now. The trustees have the fiduciary responsibility for the health of the organization, clearly, but also the policy role, the policy, full policy role. And what we see at times are trustees that want to reach down to the operations of the organization and circumvent their CEO. I'm talking just generally now, and that is problematic, and that is not what's going to get us to fluid, responsive responses, effective responses in a pandemic. So I would say, yes, understanding the roles, articulating those roles, and pushing each other in appropriate ways, I think is healthy.
Chancellor, you're my guest.
Hey.
Was that your last word, or would you like a closing statement?
Thank you. This is fun. Thank you for allowing me for a quiet moment to reflect, to share some thoughts about what we're doing at LACCD. Your questions were excellent. I enjoyed them. It got me to think both personally and institutionally about my role as a leader, and hopefully will assist in making good decisions down the road. So I wish everybody a good health, stay safe. A sus familias les deseo mucha salud, fuerza y valor. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chancellor Francisco Rodriguez, Chancellor of Los Angeles Community College District. Stay safe, everyone, and we will see you online. If you're on Facebook, share this video, like it. If you're on Twitter, follow us, retweet. The retweets are very important here. If you're on Instagram, follow us. If you're on Snapchat as well. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to us, share the video, send it via text message, email. Have a good rest of your day. Be safe and be good, everyone. Thank you very much.